In today's show, a season review for Shaedon Sharpe. Has Sharpe plateaued or built a base for a takeoff? Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter Mike Richmond. Listen to another episode of Locked On Blazers. In today's program, we're continuing our season review series, talking all things Shaedon Sharpe. We'll talk about what role and expectations he should have for next season. We'll revisit Michael from the past to talk about the best case and worst case scenarios that I set way back in September, but prior to the season starting, and we'll start dissecting Sharpe's 2025-2026 season as we get into a full season review series. We're going to do these for everybody on the roster. We've already done Denny, we've already done Scoot, and now it's Shay's turn to get in on the mix. Shaedon Sharpe appeared in 50 games in his fourth NBA season, averaging 20.8 points, 4.3 boards, 2.6 assists, shot 45.2% from the floor, including 33.7% from three and 78.7% from the free throw line. He started 42 of those 50 games and averaged 29.4 minutes a night. His season started by securing his future. Prior to the first game of the season, or in leading up to the first game of the season, is probably a better way to say that, Sharpe agreed to a rookie contract extension, a 4-year, $90 million deal, a pact that will kick in this coming season, at the 26-27 year, securing his future, not just with the Trailblazers, but financially, right? And investments both in him by the team, and a sign that they believe that he can be part of what's next, or at least that making sure that he has the security to be part of what's next is valuable for them as a franchise. And then Sharpe's season got off to a start where he just couldn't kind of get his legs right. He pops up on the injury report early in the season on October 31st. It's the first week of the season, maybe technically the second week of the season, but it's about game 4 of the year with a left calf injury. He spent a few games after that injury on sort of an unspecified minutes limit. Tiago Splitter would mention he's on a minutes limit. He can't play as much as we want him to. Then, in late November, about a month later, he missed 4 games with a right calf strain. And then he comes back and kind of just gets rolling. Plays, misses those 4 games, but he played in 40 of the first 52 games. He started 42 of those. Initially, right when he came back from that right calf injury in late November, he spent a couple games coming off the bench, and then he returns, moves back into the starting lineup, and by that time, the Blazers are missing their dudes. Scoot Henderson has been out for the whole season. Blake Wesley's now hurt. Drew Holiday's now hurt. Jeremy Grant is about to get hurt shortly thereafter this. They're light on guards. They're light on shot creation. They need Shaedon Sharpe to kind of step into a bigger role. And he gets pushed into not just he was primed to take on a bigger role anyways, right? In his 4th season, he averaged 18 a game the prior year. Even coming into the season, probably their best sort of off the dribble shot creator, depending on your opinion of Jeremy Grant. Sharpe was going to step into a large role anyways, just based on sort of the reality of the roster. But because of the injuries, he gets thrust into this much larger role. A usage rate pushing up towards 30% for much of the year. This previous season, his usage rate had been a career high 25%, which that's kind of the mark of a starting offensive player. 30% is by offensive player, I mean someone who's going to take and create shots on their own, right? Is someone who's going to give me the ball, I'm going to go to work type of players, in that 25 plus range. 30 is the mark of true high level offensive engine type of creators. Clean the Glass has 29.3%, which is Sharpe's mark for the season in the 92nd percentile among combo guards. And that is possessions you use. So that's when you take a shot, when you get to the free throw line to shoot free throws, when you turn the ball over, or when you finish a possession by creating a bucket for someone else, i.e. an assist, right? So like that is Sharpe with this massive increase in usage, right? Like a 25% jump in overall sort of like responsibility of possessions that he finished. He's kind of pushed in this bigger role. And I would say overall it kind of had positives and negatives. He sets a career high in scoring. His overall efficiency in terms of like points per shot attempt or true shooting percentage dipped a little bit, but really not that much, even with that big that big jump in usage rate. So like his overall sort of scoring efficiency doesn't take a hit because he's doing so much. Like he sets a career high in scoring. But then also I think we saw the sort of limits of what Shaedon Sharpe, tasked with that much opportunity, kind of presents. And then after playing, 45 games, he gets hurt again. And again, it's the calf. He leaves the game against February 6th, left calf strain, what the team initially called calf soreness. So he leaves halftime a game against February 6th against the Grizzlies. That was ironically Scoot's season debut after Scoot Henderson missed the first 51 games of the season. They played literally 1 minute together on the court. And then when Scoot finally returns, Shaedon leaves, just kind of like a tough situation for the Blazers as they try to evaluate their young players. Sharpe would miss the next 4.5 games heading into the All-Star break because he didn't come back in second half of that game. And then a couple games after the All-Star break, the third, like just before the start of the third game of the All-Star break, the Blazers announced that Sharpe doesn't just have left calf soreness, which was later upgraded to a strain, is that he has a stress reaction of the left fibula, and he'd be reevaluated in 4 to 6 weeks. He misses the next 28 games and returns in the penultimate game of the season. That's the second to last game of the season. For those of you who are not fresh on your SAT words, it's kind of a tough game to get dropped into. It's a high leverage game against the Clippers. It's basically winner take eighth against the Clippers. It's not like there are no training wheels on this one. It's like, hey, you're going to play. Cool. Happy to have you back. This is the biggest game of the season. Get in there. And Sharpe scores 8 points, has 4 boards on 3 of 10 shooting and 15 minutes off the bench. That's tough, right? Like, I don't think he played particularly well in that game. I don't think he played particularly poorly, but like he did look like someone just sort of like getting back to it because he hadn't played since freaking February 6th. And he's getting in there in the first week of April. Like he's missed 2 full months and he's like dropping him in there. He'd play another 17 minutes in the Blazers regular season finale and then would assume a bench role for the play-in and playoff series. I thought the way he was used in the playoffs against the Spurs was weird because it just wasn't the rhythm he had. He had played a handful of games off the bench in December. He had played a couple games off the bench to end the regular season. So like he was going to have a different role because it's like he had mostly been a starter and the Blazers had established a lineup without Sharpe that was pretty effective, quite frankly. The best lineup in terms of like, just like impact stats was that Drew Holiday and Scoot Henderson, Denny Avdia, Toumani Camara, Donovan Clingan quintet. So like it didn't make sense to sort of put Shaedon back in the starting lineup, even if he had been there for most of the season, right? Like a bench role was appropriate, but the specifics of the bench role were really weird. He didn't play in the way that they did the rotation. He didn't play at all in the first quarter, at all in the third quarter, so he would start the second and fourth quarters. That's a long time to sit to begin the game. Like sit for the first 12 minutes, and then you're going to get like a 6 or 8 minute cameo, right? And maybe you'll play a little bit more if you're playing well, but like that, that's you're kind of gonna just like not, you're gonna play the even quarters only, and you're probably not gonna close the game. So it's like I think that was probably a misstep, was like putting him in this like weird role and not just like putting him in as the first sub, like putting him in Matisse Thybulle ahead of Sharpe. It's like, if you're going to do that, you might as well just straight up not play him, right? Like it was, if you're going to use him and play him and give him a normal role, and just slowly they just phased him out. He plays 22 minutes in game 1, plays shy of 13 minutes in game 2, shy of 14 minutes in game 3, shy of 13 minutes in game 4. Like he's playing like 13, 14 minutes, right? And in game 5, he plays one shift. 6 minutes in the first half, does not play in the second half. Now the Blazers were getting walloped and Thiago Splitter was searching for answers, but there was a moment and sort of like a meaningful moment in the game 3 for Shaedon Sharpe, in which he didn't recognize a play that not only did Thiago Splitter diagnose before the Spurs got the ball in bounds coming out of a timeout. He yelled, "Hey, Shaedon, they're going to come set a screen for him." And he was supposed to guard Victor Wembanyama, and he doesn't. And Victor Wembanyama gets a dunk, and Thiago Splitter runs out on the court, stomping mad, literally stomping mad, yells the F word, calls a timeout, and benches Shaedon for the rest of the half, right? It was indicative of the frustration that Thiago had with Sharpe's sort of attentiveness on that end. I don't think he played terrible on defense, but I think he gave the Spurs like a target to run after. And then he had some sort of moments where he wasn't at his best. And that sort of combination of like lack of focus and, he has a sort of a low intensity level and low skill level on defense anyways. You couple that with a lack of focus and like the margins are slim and you're just, Splitter just gave up on him. Right or not, that's how it worked. I don't think Sharpe like earned more minutes, but I don't think he played so poorly that he deserved so few minutes, if that makes sense. Like I don't think he wasn't screaming to play much more than 20 minutes a game, but it was a little bit weird that he only played 14 minutes a game. But I also think I think this was the best season of Shaedon Sharpe's career. With the ups and downs, with the injuries, I think this was the best version of Shaedon Sharpe we've ever seen. With that in mind, I want to revisit my preseason predictions, talk about my best and worst case scenarios that I sort of envisioned for Sharpe. Because while I think there are some warts to his game and some struggles this year, I also think very, very plainly that this was the best Shaedon Sharpe we have ever seen. Let's do that in the second segment. Join me there, won't you? First, though, I want to tell you that today's show is brought to you by Quo. Missed calls and slow follow-ups are silent killers for businesses. That's how money gets left on the table without people even realizing. That's why today's episode is brought to you by Quo, spelled Quo, the business communication system built so you never miss a call. Quo helps businesses keep every conversation organized by letting your entire team manage calls and texts from one shared number. No more drop messages, missed opportunities, or disconnected communication. It's designed for how modern businesses actually operate. Here's what you're going to love about Quo. Everything lives in one clean thread. All the calls, all the text message, all the voicemails from each client. The whole team sees the conversation so nothing falls through the cracks. It just makes businesses feel more organized and responsive. Money's on the line. Always say hello with Quo. Try Quo for free. Plus, get 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/lockedonnba. That's quo.com, quo.com/lockedonnba. Today's show is also brought to you by PrizePicks. It's the NBA playoffs. The regular season is wrapped. We've reached the second round of the playoffs, my favorite time of the year. There's no better way to get even more out of all the high-flying basketball action than PrizePicks, a preferred partner of the NBA. Every bucket, every dime, every big performance means more when you're building lineups on PrizePicks. PrizePicks is simple to play. You pick more or less on 2 or 6 player stat projections, and if your picks are right, you can cash in. You can choose from all your favorite sports too: basketball, baseball, hockey, soccer, what have you. It's available in all 50 states. You can start building your lineups around your favorite players, your favorite teams, picking more or less on things like points, assists, rebounds. Super easy, super quick. And it's got features like Flex Play because you can still get a payout even if one of your picks misses. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use that code LOCKEDONNBA. You're going to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. You don't even have to win. That's code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. It's that simple. PrizePicks, a preferred partner of the NBA. All right. If you are living that everyday lifestyle, make it official. Go join the Locked On Everydayer Club. You get an ad-free version of this podcast. Plus, it's in your audio feeds. Locked On Blazers without any interruptions. Plus, access to the members-only Discord. You can chop it up with me and your fellow Blazers fans. All of that, $5 a month, $50 a year. LockedOnBlazers.supercast.com. There's a link in the show notes for more. This was the best version of Shaedon Sharpe we've ever seen. I I think two things can be true at once. I feel like, and I'm probably part of the problem here, right? Because I'm like someone who talks into a microphone on the internet. I'm a talking head on your YouTube channel and some guy who's in your ear and your podcast feed 5 days a week. Like, we tend to have this sort of like dichotomy of what improvement is. Either the guy got better or they suck. And like, that is maybe a good way to sort of compartmentalize things, but in your brain, but it's not how development works. Two things can be true at once. Shaedon Sharpe did not make a massive leap. And in my mind, did not make a move in a trajectory that says that he has deep star potential. But he also got better and had the best season of his career. This is the best version of him that we have seen. What I want to do before we talk more about the best version of Shaedon Sharpe that we've seen is revisit from all Michael from the past. Here's my preseason predictions that I do during the season reviews, talking about best and worst case scenarios. The idea is that it is the polls, the best case scenario without injuries, the worst case scenario within reason, and everyone falls in between. And then we revisit them this time of year to see what I thought way back in the fall, to kind of look back at our perception of players to help us look forward of what they might do. So without further ado, let's revisit for Michael from the past. What'd you think about Shaedon Sharpe way back in September? What's the best case scenario for Shaedon Sharpe is that the outside shooting catches up with the rest of his offensive game, and Sharpe, a career 33% shooter from deep, pushes up to or even slightly above league average on something like 7 or 8 3-point attempts per game. He grows into a comfortable 3-level scorer, and he adds outside shooting into already a pretty impressive mid-range arsenal and elite finishing at the rim that he showed in his third NBA season. And because he's a competent scorer from everywhere on the court, the level of defensive attention that he demands ramps up, which makes playmaking reads easier. The best case scenario is that Shaedon Sharpe settles into being a good or even better than good. Let's call it excellent defensive rebounder. The playmaking comes around, and he is capable in moments of being an offensive engine, or in the very least, being a consistent go-to scorer with the level of efficiency as a go-to scorer that portends to offensive star ceiling. The best case scenario on the other side of the ball is that he's a decent defender, and at least an attentive off-ball defender. The best case scenario probably still leaves him as a below-average defender. Like, let's be honest about what he was in year 3 and what he's been throughout his career. Even the best case scenario probably means Shaedon Sharpe is not a plus defender in his 4th season, just considering the strides he would need to make. The worst case scenario for Shaedon Sharpe is that the shooting remains shaky at best, and he settles into his career average or worse from 3. A career average 33% shooter settles into being like solidly below average there, and we're talking 4 consecutive seasons of like seeing a guy who can't really shoot that well from 3, and you start to say, okay, maybe that's part of his game. That's the worst case scenario. And the worst case scenario is that the secondary stuff never clicks. So he doesn't get to grow his offensive game because the rebounding, he's like, oh yeah, he's a pretty good rebounder, but it's nothing really, really special. The playmaking never really comes around. He's like, yeah, he can make some passes, but whatever. And he sort of never grows his game beyond dude who can score. He's a decent scorer from 17 and in. That's the worst case scenario. And that when we get to the end of the season, he doesn't look like a star on the rise, but merely a gifted shooting guard who doesn't shoot all that well. That's the worst case scenario. And the worst case scenario sort of couples with a guy who just never quite gets it on defense. He's never like an imposing on the ball force, and more importantly, he's never competitive. And the worst case scenario is that he looks lost and not like he's always trying to figure out how to become unlost in the team scheme portion of defense. The worst case scenario is he's just a dude that seems to be cruising through the defensive possessions in order to get back to the other side of the floor where the fun stuff happens. Thank you, Michael from the past. And also, oh no, I think Shaedon Sharpe landed very clearly in the worst case scenario. A gifted shooting guard who doesn't shoot that well and doesn't consistently bring much secondary production to the table, that does not look like he's capable of being an offensive engine. Sharpe got thrust into this massive role this season, right? He's he's not yet 23, so 22 years old, right? He's like, he got thrust into this massive offensive role this season. Perhaps in over his head, perhaps water's too deep, right? And as I mentioned, his efficiency as a shooter and as a scorer didn't take a big dip despite that huge jump to like probably an unreasonable amount of sort of offensive responsibility. But he didn't, like, what you were hoping for is that he kind of does what Denny did, and it's like he just soaks up the space, right? Is like that he becomes water, and whatever sort of vessel you put him in, he manages to fill it. And he just looked incapable of doing that. And I'd like to offer a caveat. When I'm doing the best and worst case scenarios, worst case scenario isn't meant to be like a panic, right? What I'm trying to do is set the poles and say, like, it's worst case scenario within reason. So it's saying like, hey, if things go bad, this is kind of what they look like. And that's kind of what they looked like for Shaedon Sharpe. He still averaged 20 a game. He has some stuff. He's still a very good finisher at the rim. Like he has some stuff. I don't always get those worst case scenarios. I don't get them the as spot on as I did with Shea, but I feel like I really did in this one, because like he basically has identical career efficiency scoring wise, despite the massive jump in usage, a career high in scoring, a huge jump in his steal percentage. He was getting pretty good at those, like stealing those early hit ahead passes when guys would try to throw a pass from the backcourt to the front court. Sharpe was pretty good at intercepting those and going the other way. Like he became that was like a skill of his on defense for sure. And yet the defense leaves so much to be desired. He's just, sometimes it's like, what is he doing in off-ball situations? Where is he locked in? And he just, despite not having a drop in efficiency, he didn't have an increase in efficiency, and he remains an inefficient scorer because of the lack of shooting and the lack of like real craft to get to the free throw line with regularity. So that leaves me at this place where it's like, this is a young player who got better, but this is not a young player who suggests clearly to me that they have star potential. So what do you do with Shaedon Sharpe? I don't think you're necessarily in some sort of danger zone with him, but you are at a point where figuring out how to maximize him becomes more important. Let's talk about that and what's next for Shea in the second segment. Join me there, won't you? First, though, I want to tell you that today's program is brought to you by DoorDash. It's the NBA playoffs, and DoorDash has a way to keep fans in their bag the whole way through the postseason. Whether you're watching, every single second of your favorite team, whether you're watching the highlights, catching up early in the morning, or you're just making sure that you see the tunnel fits of your favorite players. DoorDash makes the entire season more fun no matter how you're getting into it, because every player has their bag. And with DoorDash, fans can have one too. DoorDash keeps your snacks stocked, your gear fresh, and your watch party vibes absolutely on point. So, say you're staying up for the post-game interviews and you just say, I really need a little snack. DoorDash is built for exactly that. Or you made it through a tough overtime game and your team lost. Well, DoorDash can be your post-game treat to give you a little pick-me-up after a tough defeat. Or, if you're hanging out with your buddies watching the game and one of them is always on 2% on their phone, well, you can order a phone charger on DoorDash as well. From tip-off to overtime, stay in your bag and order on DoorDash. Get snacks, get drinks, get gear, whatever gets you through the season, delivered right to your door. DoorDash in your bag all season long. Today's show also brought to you by Indeed. Does this sound familiar? Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, and your inbox is overflowing. And on top of all of that, you got one position on your team that still needs to be filled. If that sounds familiar to you, you need Indeed sponsored jobs. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, you got to reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for with the skills, experience, and location that you need. So you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. That's why you're using Indeed sponsored jobs. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute of this ad read, well, I'll be talking to you. Companies like yours will have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing those candidates. And listeners of my show will get this $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast now and support my show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire. This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. All right, still a pass first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond, still listening to Locked On Blazers, still season review for Shaedon Sharpe. Sharpe didn't shoot well from three, 30, just shy of 34%. But he also took less threes. His 3-point rate dropped. Like if you just look at his like sort of like total numbers or per game numbers, even like per possession numbers, they don't show a decline because his just usage jumped. He just did. He had the ball a lot more. He got to shoot a lot more because Drew Holiday missed 9 weeks and they didn't have didn't have other guards. And it was for a lot of the season it was just Shea and Denny. And I think a lot of this is like Shea was probably thrust into a role he's not capable of, but I think the ideal version of him would be to be capable of it, to be able to seize that opportunity. And not that he like greatly failed in it. He just he averaged 20 a game, right? It's more that he didn't do the type of things that you say, oh yeah, this dude can be a building block. And instead it was like, yeah, he's got some stuff, but it wasn't like this big old jump, right? There were 47 players in the NBA who averaged 20 points per game, if you include Jason Tatum, who just played 16 games. But the 47 players who averaged 20 points per game this season, of those 47 players, Shaedon Sharpe's true shooting percentage was 45th. Dylan Brooks was dead last. Jason Tatum was 46th, and there's your boy Shaedon Sharpe at 45. Dylan Brooks brings, defense to the table, like he's got more going on. Tatum averaged 10 rebounds a game and had some crazy passing nights. Really, his playmaking was wild when he came back from an Achilles injury. He was also coming back notably from an Achilles injury. Sharpe doesn't have the secondary stuff in his game. He does not possess the secondary skills as a passer, as a defender, as a rebounder, as any type of playmaker, to be a low efficiency, high volume scorer. He just can't. He can't be that. His game. If your best skill is scoring, and quite frankly, maybe your only like high level skill is scoring, and that's what Sharpe is right now. You have to be an efficient scorer, and that doesn't mean that he needs to bomb away from three, but. So his 3-point rate drops. He shoots less per field goal attempts. He's shooting less threes, right? But also his 2-point percentage dropped a little bit. His finishing at the rim, which was elite in year 3, took a slight step back. Still very good there. But he was flirting with very special at the rim. I think some of that is just his handle remains a major limitation. He just can't get to past guys and get to his spots. If he could do that, it would open up so much of his game. His off-ball defense is really troubling at times. And even if you just say okay, he's not going to be a very good defender. He doesn't move laterally very well. His strength that translates when he's finishing at the rim just doesn't show up as much on defense. And on a team with the Blazers where they play a bunch of good defenders, he's the weak link that teams hunt. And so he's just he's going to get a lot of action. Either teams are going to go at him on that end. Even if you just kind of say okay, the defense stuff we'll just put in another pile, right? The offense has to be at a higher level for him to be a really, really, really useful player. Not that he's a bad basketball player, but we're talking upper echelon useful, right? I think the reason he didn't play in the playoffs was part because he just kind of lost the trust of the coach and Splitter wanted more intensity from him and more precision from him. And he didn't bring that. He doesn't play with a lot of fire often. His dog in him per 36 is pretty low. Playing hard is a skill. And I don't think Shaedon Sharpe possesses that skill of playing hard. Not that he's incapable of it, but the way that some guys have to think about keeping their elbow in on their jump shots, Shaedon Sharpe has to think about playing hard. And if you're thinking about keeping your elbow in on jumpers, you're not shooting that clean. If you're thinking about playing hard, you're probably waiting a tick to play hard. And those are that's just sort of the reality of this year. I don't think Shaedon Sharpe is a bad basketball player, but I do think, I think two things can be true at once. As I mentioned before, this was the best version of him we have seen. And at the end of this year, I felt more clarity about Sharpe's inability to reach a star level than I had at any point prior to this. At the end of year 4, and I'll probably feel the same way about Scoot last year. Or the end of next year, we'll get the clarity. It's at some point, I don't care that he's, not yet He'll turn 23 in 3 weeks. Turns 23 at the end of May. Like, and that he came to basketball late, and that he skipped a year of high school and didn't play. It's like at some point, 4 years in the NBA, it's time to do. It's not a time to seem. It's in the motto of the great state of North Carolina is to be rather than to seem, and it is time for my man Shaedon Sharpe to esse quam videre. That is to be rather than to seem. And right now he seems like a good player, but like functionally, he's a guy who needs to add more to his game. All of that said, he starts the first year of his $90 million contract next year. Starts at 12% of the salary cap. He is not being paid like a star. He is not. There is no sort of financial pressure on him to live up to something. He is being paid like your fifth starter or like a high-level bench player. Sharpe absolutely has the tools to live up to that contract because he can score and because of the athleticism and the rim finishing. Like, absolutely has that. Sharpe's path to being quote unquote worth it is not actually that hard. And here's a thought I'll leave you with. And I've been thinking about this a lot. In year one, Sharpe was not a very good rookie, but he played a lot because he was like sort of tantalizing rookie, right? He struggled like in terms of like the grand scheme of the NBA. And he didn't end up making an all-rookie team, and he struggled maybe grand scheme of his peers as well, right? But he played a lot, and a lot of what he did was this off-ball role stuff. He worked the baseline as a cutter, and he was a alley-oop threat, and he would, cut baseline and get a one dribble dunk or a no dribble dunk or a lob, right? And perhaps in year 5, doing less and having a more defined role. And again, the way they handled him in the playoffs, I thought was really pretty weird. And I don't think they handled it well, and I don't think he handled it well. I don't think he said, "Oh, you're going to put me in this weird role. I'm going to show you." Like, he didn't play to prove them wrong, right? I thought he just kind of like, I thought he was still in cruise control, and they just need him to run hotter, right? And he might not do that. Playing hard is a skill. But as it stands right now in May of 2025, we're a long way from whatever is going to happen in October. I think he's a bench player to begin next season. Like, I think Dame and Drew are going to be your starters, assuming everyone's healthy and available. Scoot Henderson leapfrogs him and was pretty more impactful, positively impactful at a team level, maybe not a box score level, but in an individual statistical level. But on the team level, Blazers were better with Scoot on the floor. And like in a somewhat crowded guard rotation, Sharpe is behind those guys. And so I'm thinking about that year 1 role and how he was an off-ball guy and how he was a cutter and how like things were simplified for him because he had the ball less. And part of me thinks that Sharpe has a great deal of offensive skill. And when he is not thrust into a 30% usage role, and if he gets pushed back into something like a 18%, 20%, sort of like normal, like come off the bench combo guard type of offense, right? That him coming off screens and just like attacking, catching on the move, right? The sort of the go and catch. So he catches it on the move. That's an NBA parlance you'll hear, as opposed to catch and go and catch. So he catches it while having a full head of steam, or he is working the baseline as a cutter. Like perhaps a smaller role actually will help him shine more. And if he can shine more there and figure out how to get in when you fit in, he has some scoring chops. Like, he wasn't an elite mid-range shooter, but I think it's there. Like, he's a good mid-range scorer. He's shown to be a very, very, very good finisher at the rim. And it's at this point for Sharpe, it's maximizing his gifts and trying to minimize his weaknesses. If the defense gets a little bit better and the offense gets better, like, having your weaknesses be less weak and your strengths be more strong is your path to being a more impactful player. And Sharpe, again, has a very clean path to being quote unquote worth his contract. It's there for him. And I think even the team context will make it easy for him to sort of live up to being like fairly paid for his level of production because of the scoring skill that he does possess, even as a sort of non-shooter, non-passer, non-defender. A shooting guard who doesn't shoot that well and doesn't have much secondary skills. He's young. He has a place to get better. He's coming off the best season of his career when he scored 20 points per game in the league. And as critical as I've been in him during this half hour of the show, I still do think there is more to tap into, and perhaps doing less allows him to tap into more, and perhaps, quite frankly, a different coach, because it doesn't sound like Thiago Splitter is going to come back. More on that in Monday's program. A different coach can figure out how to maximize him in a more creative way, in a more creative offense, in a more even just structured offense that gives Sharpe like straight up, here's where your catches are going to be, and here's where you're going to be able to attack from type of direction. That is going to do it for today's program. Come back for more next week. 5 shows, wherever you get podcasts, also on YouTube. Monday's show, we'll talk about some news from around the NBA, including Thiago Splitter's future in potentially being somewhere else other than with the Portland Trail Blazers, plus any other news that pops up over the weekends. I appreciate you listening. Tell your friends about the podcast. I will talk to you soon.